Most students are coming to the United States thinking that I'm going to learn a lot about my subject areas that I want to study in the classroom. I'm going to learn a lot about American culture. But in fact, what you probably learn more about is no matter how many of these experiences you've had where you've picked yourself up out of one place where you're very comfortable and moved to another place to try to settle in and become part of a community, there's always a little bit of trauma that's involved in that process. How do you do it? How do you make friends in the United States with American students or other international students? Those are problems that you have to solve. You have to really kind of work at it.
What was the IPO like back in the 90s when you stepped into that director's role?
It was kind of a one-person office. We probably had about 45 to 50 international students. Our goal really is to have 10 to 12% of our student body to be international. I think we have 52 countries represented on campus.
Why is that important?
Well, the world is so interconnected. We're really trying to prepare young people to become citizens not only of their own community, not only of their own country, but of the world. In terms of U.S. higher education, the quality of an experience that you're going to have at Augustana University, it's on the same level as famous universities. For students in China, for students in India, for students all over Africa and Latin America, how do they find out about this small liberal arts university in Sioux Falls, South Dakota? It's a challenge when we travel overseas. We're always visiting high schools or advising centers. It's really trying to make connections with students. The last 2 or 3 weeks, I've probably been on 20 different video calls.
You could very much easily delegate that to someone else, but you personally do still jump on these calls.
You know, it's the best part of the job. You're going to go into the mountains of Nepal, into the Himalayas. You want a guide, an experienced guide who's going to lead you down the right path, introduce you to the culture, remind you of the challenges that lie ahead of you in terms of climbing a tall mountain, keeping you safe in some ways. Really, in the end, just to help students make sure that the decision that they're making to come to Augustana University is good for them.
And welcome back to college. This is a show where we share the incredible transformations of international students who studied abroad at college in the US. And honestly, I'm actually very lucky I was able to go to the US. And if it wasn't for the International Programs Office at Augustana University, I don't know how my college journey would have gone. It's hard to find a university overseas. When you are 10,000 miles away, it is so much more difficult than if you're a domestic student just 10 miles away. So how do we do it? Where do we even begin when we're looking for a college? Well, today's guest is an absolute expert at international recruiting and all things to do with international students in a college. He is quintessentially the OG, the founding father of the Augustana IPO. He began his position as the Director of International Programs back in August 1992, many years ago. And after some life-changing volunteering he did in Nepal for the Peace Corps and teaching some English in Japan, he's now become very much an internationalist. I can't wait to dive into this conversation to share with you how important it is to have a friendly international community on an American college campus, but also the X factors that make the IPO at Augustana possibly one of the best in the entire US. Donn Grinager, I want to thank you for everything that you've done for me to make my college journey so special. And I'm glad that I was able to pick Augustana as my college in the US. Without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, wherever you are listening or watching this, please stand up and give a big cheer for our guest today. Welcome him to the center stage as we go back to college with Donn. Donn Grinager, welcome back to college.
Thank you, Zach. It's great to be here.
And I'm allowed to say that because you've actually taken some time off college despite being here for 31 years. You've been away for the last 5, but this semester you're back head IPO, doing some administration and some recruiting work.
That's right. Yes, I was at Augustana College, or started at Augustana College, now, of course, Augustana University. I started in 1992. and I was the director of the International Programs Office until 2018, when I left and went to work for a family company, a company that my brother started. I was there for 5 years and just returned in October. And now I'm the director of international admission. So I'm located in the admission office and work very closely with Erin Kane and Heather Reed, both of whom are the co-directors of the International Programs Office now.
There's been quite a bit of a shift in roles, but I think it works out really nicely because we've had over the last, I think, year or so, it's been Wade has left and Ben Iverson's also left as well. So it's sort of thrown a bit of a spanner in the works. I think that's why they got you back with all your years of experience to sort of hold down the fort and, I don't know, just sort of get things back up and running how they should be, really.
Yeah, that's right. And Wade Gamar and Ben Iverson, very good friends of mine and very good friends of Heather and Aaron's, and we all remain in very close contact with each other. In some ways, you could say we're still a team, even though Wade and Ben have moved on to other opportunities that are serving them well in their professional lives and personal lives. And their departure did create a bit of an opening for me to come back. And so I'm very happy to be back on campus, working with prospective international students specifically. In my new role, I'm working very specifically with prospective students. I have some territories overseas that I share with some international admission responsibilities with my colleagues, Liz Fossum and Bryn Heinert. And so it's fun to work with those two new colleagues, both new to the admission profession, and but very capable women in their own right, recent graduates of Augustana, both of them. And so it's kind of fun to come back and be a part of the Augustana admission team and partnering with the International Programs Office to make sure that we get some students that feel like Augustana is a good fit, but also to kind of support those students once they get on campus. But really my primary role is just working with them on the front end, helping them get here. And then once they're on campus, then Heather Reed specifically, but Heather and Aaron and their colleagues, Kelsey and Umema, really kind of take over and support them, guide them, nurture them, and help them kind of figure out their way on campus.
Exactly right. And I think recruiting is such a huge job because I feel like once they're here, well, you've got students who are here. I think it's easier once they're in person, you can kind of look after them. But to be able to get them from countries all over the world, that seems like a massive task.
It's a challenge. And Augustana, because of our location in South Dakota and in Sioux Falls, there are some additional challenges to that process, partly because the state of South Dakota doesn't have the same brand as other states like California, New York, Florida, some of those kinds of states. So on one level, there's a process of trying to help students who aren't that familiar with the geography of the United States to really kind of find South Dakota on a map, and then to talk about all the great qualities of what I think is one of the best college towns or university towns in the United States, and that's Sioux Falls. So to be able to kind of help students discover the opportunities that they would have as students, not only at Augustana University, but in Sioux Falls, and utilizing, the city of Sioux Falls really as kind of a learning environment where they can, get internships, part-time jobs, that kind of stuff, all those kinds of important things that really complement a student's formal education in the classroom.
Totally. And before we get too heavily into the recruiting, I'm interested to backtrack a bit about your college experience. You went to Dakota Wesleyan, local sort of South Dakotan college.
Yeah.
And you finished with a biology, communications and theatre major.
That's right. Yeah.
Which is interesting. Did you have aspirations to become an actor?
Yeah. Well, Dakota Wesleyan University is another historic South Dakota university. It's about an hour away from Sioux Falls. I have 4 older siblings. The next youngest, though I'm the youngest of the family, the next youngest is about 9 years older than I am. But all 4 of my older siblings went to Dakota Wesleyan. Great school, great institution. Had a great college experience there. And then after college, I went into the Peace Corps, Went to the country of Nepal and lived for about a year and a half working on a fisheries project.
How did that sort of come about? That seems to be a bit odd, just South Dakota, I'll just go to Nepal so I can help sort of local farmers with their business.
Yeah, right. Well, one of my older brothers, my brother John, had been in the Peace Corps about 10 years prior to my entry into the Peace Corps. He was in the country of Paraguay.
And what exactly is the Peace Corps?
Yeah, the Peace Corps is it's an organization through the United States government. It's really under the United States State Department or Department of State, and it's a volunteer organization or program in the United States that was really set up under President John F. Kennedy back in the 60s.
Right, okay.
And what it has really done is allowed young, mostly college graduates, spend 2 years or shortly or a little bit more time than that to go overseas to countries and volunteer. There's a lot of education projects, teacher education, English education, math, science education programs. I was in a fisheries program working with fish farmers in the case of Nepal. There's a lot of other programs in the Peace Corps, for example, forestry or reforestation projects, different agricultural projects, generally speaking. So there's just a lot of opportunities for young college graduates to kind of contribute to the efforts to build positive relationships with countries all over the world. And so,
true. And your brother was doing that, was he?
Yeah, so he did that. He would have gone in obviously in the 1970s. He was actually in a he built a lot of latrines, so he was in a sanitation project in Paraguay, South America at the time. And I think because he's 10 years older than I am, so when he was 22, 23 years old doing the Peace Corps, Paraguay, I would have been 12, 13, 14 years old, and really kind of looked up to my older siblings, obviously, as most people do. And I think that's where the seed or the idea that maybe that would be something I'd enjoy doing at some point came about. And so when I was a senior in college in January of 1984, I thought, well, I'm going to apply, and I got accepted. I was really kind of thinking about the Middle East because I had a lot of good friends at Dakota Wesleyan that were from Jordan and Saudi Arabia.
Right, so international students.
A lot of international students. Yeah, I was on the soccer club, and so a lot of my friends were international students at the time.
Yeah, soccer's such a worldwide game.
It's such a worldwide game that it really kind of invites, connections and networks and friendships with people all around the world. And so I kind of thought that I wanted to study Arabic, but at that point, the Peace Corps didn't have any programs in the Arabic-speaking world. So on my application for the Peace Corps, I had listed the Near East. And then one day, probably about 6 months later, I got a packet in the mail say, hey, congratulations, you've been accepted into the Peace Corps, and we're going to place you in Nepal. And I'm going, Nepal, wow, of all the places. It was one of the best life experiences I've ever had.
Yeah, I can only imagine. Yeah. It seems like such a great opportunity.
Oh, yeah, no, it was a fantastic thing. And that was really, when I left the United States for Nepal, it was the first time I'd ever been outside the United States. And it's a very steep learning curve in all respects. Didn't speak any Nepali, but we spent our first 3 months in what they call high intensity language training. So studied Nepali for very intensely, 8 hours a day for 3 months before heading down to the village that I lived in and working with farmers. Yeah, so it was
amazing experience.
Amazing experience, yes.
That sounds super cool. And you were there for 2 years?
No, well, the program itself is a 2-year program. I came back early. I did what they call early terminated.
Okay.
My father had some health problems. He had been battling rheumatoid arthritis and then Parkinson's disease. And so I was just getting these very kind of challenging letters from my mom at the time and thought, well, maybe this is time for me to come home and kind of spend some time with my parents.
That would have been really tough, especially your first adventure overseas too.
Yeah. It wasn't, because I was down in the village, and it would take a postcard or a letter about 3 weeks to make it from, at that time, my parents were living in Mitchell, South Dakota, to make it from Mitchell back to
You don't have
to Nepal.
instant SMS or anything.
No, yeah, times have changed a little bit, haven't they, since then?
3 weeks. Wow, that's a long delay to send messages to one
Yeah,
another.
yeah. And then if I were to talk to them on the phone, I'd have to go up to the capital city of Kathmandu and go to a kind of a public phone booth or a phone center and call, to call home. And so that would happen about once every 3 months, I suppose. And back in those days, it was all via satellite, I would imagine. But there'd be these long delays. You'd say something on the phone, you'd have to stop and pause, and then wait for the reply on the other side.
It's funny because we get upset now if there's a tiny little bit of delay.
Yeah, no, times have changed. Technology has changed.
Well, your experience in Nepal seems to be sort of quite life-changing just in itself, and really just open up your perspective to the world. And after that, you ended up doing some English teaching in Japan for a couple of years with your wife.
Yeah, after Nepal, I came back. I'd been working at a KOA campground as a campground manager for several summers. I came back in February of '86, started grad school then in August of '86, that same year, I guess, later that summer, after kind of the summer camping season. So I was in graduate school for 3 years, got a Master of Arts in Religion, met my wife at the time, and then my wife and I decided, we were living in Denver, Colorado at the time, and decided to take a look at the JET program, Japan Exchange and Teaching Program. We'd had some other friends who had been at the same graduate school who had left a year earlier for the JET program, and they kept writing us letters saying, hey, you guys would love this program. You guys got to think about coming over. So we applied. The city that we ended up, and we got accepted, obviously, and we ended up going to a town called Hida Takayama. It's kind of a famous, it's a famous tourist destination, particularly for Japanese tourists. International tourists don't know about it as much, but the Japanese tourists do. And it happened to be Hida Takayama and the city of Denver were sister cities, and because we were applying at that point from Denver, we were both placed in Hida Takayama, which is in the very central part of Japan, kind of on the western slope of the Japanese Alps. So I know you're a skier and
snowboarder.
Excuse me. Oh yeah, sorry about that. You're a snowboarder. My daughter would make the same kind of correction. She's a snowboarder as well.
I'm so keen to go to Japan because I've just heard so many good things. We were talking about this the other day, and you said that you had an experience in Japan where you had, shoulder deep powder that you were riding through.
Yeah, exactly right. So we were, like I say, we were on the western slope of the Japan Alps. On the other side is the city of Nagano. Of course, it was a host to some Winter Olympics some decades ago by now. This I'm from the prairie. Of course, South Dakota has some places to ski out in the Black Hills, about 5 hours from Sioux Falls. But really, I've grown up on the prairie, and but I've always loved downhill skiing. And one winter in Japan, we just got dumped on, and my wife and I went skiing out to a place called Honoki Daira, a rather famous ski resort in the prefecture of Gifu, Ken, about 45 minutes away from Hida Takayama, where we were living, and it had just dumped snow. And so I'd heard stories about skiing in chest-deep powder. I always thought it was a lie.
Not a real thing.
I thought it was all fake media, to be honest with you. But yeah, spent that whole weekend just skiing literally in chest-deep powder, and just have never had an experience like it since. But it was incredible. So
I'm so keen to go to Japan.
Yeah, you should go and hope. And I mean, just you've got to hunt down. I mean, you'd be flexible enough where you could just watch a weather report and then
just follow
pick up and fly. Yeah, exactly right.
What's interesting, because your daughter Abby's there doing the same JET program as well.
Yeah, that's right. So my wife Chris and I have two daughters. Our oldest daughter Nicole is a nurse, an Augustana University graduate.
And she's currently visiting Abby over in Japan.
She is, yeah. She's currently a master's degree student at the University of Oslo in Oslo, Norway. She's on her Christmas, New Year's break, and she flew to Japan to hang out with her younger sister. Our daughter Abby has been on that same JET program, Japan Exchange and Teaching Program, for the last. She's kind of on her third contract, so she's been there for about 2.5 years, and finishing up her third year there. Yeah, so they're kind of all over the place in Japan right now.
And my brother's actually also in Japan.
Yeah,
and I saw a photo, I think Nicole posted this morning.
Yeah.
She's in Kyoto, and my brother, I think, was in Kyoto yesterday.
Yeah, that's...
At the same, was it the wooden gates, those orange?
Yes. They were probably so close and maybe walked past each other.
Past each other or something.
That'd be crazy.
That's, such a small world, really.
It really is.
Yeah,
exactly right.
So how did that experience in Japan change you then?
Well, obviously, I think what the Japan experience kind of built on my experience in Nepal. And so, but they were two very, very different experiences. And what was probably the most surprising about the Japan experience from kind of on a personal level was that I'd kind of assumed that, that after my Peace Corps Nepal experience that, kind of I could take on anything and not be really kind of emotionally or intellectually challenged, culturally challenged. I just kind of thought, if you've lived successfully in the country of Nepal and lived as simply as you end up living in the village side, that you could go anywhere and kind of master anything. But what I really found out is that Nepal was equally as challenging from kind of a cultural perspective, also from kind of this concept of culture shock. It was I started all over again anytime. So I've kind of come to this realization that no matter how many of these kinds of experiences you've had, where you've kind of picked yourself up out of one place where you're very comfortable and move to another place to try to settle in and become part of a community, that there's always a little bit of trauma that's involved in that process. And so I kind of went to Japan thinking, I've got this, it's just going to be
done it before, I can do it again.
I've done it before, I can do it again. But really, I went through the exact same kinds of challenges that I did in Nepal, and that in the sense that it's a completely different language. I didn't have very many language skills when I went to Nepal. In terms of Nepali language skills, didn't have any Japanese language skills when I landed in Japan. But really, the bigger challenge is try to fit in, try to become a part of a community, building relationships, friendships, or professional relationships. Because in the context of both Nepal and Japan, I was there in a professional role. One was in Nepal, it was as a fisheries extension agent, and then in Japan as a teacher. So trying to develop those professional relationships, that was a challenge because kind of expectations and norms are very different than they are in the United States. And then on kind of a personal level, trying to build friendships and relationships, all of that I discovered takes time, it takes energy. Takes kind of a commitment. It takes some kind of self-reflection in terms of trying to figure out how one copes with all those challenges. Sometimes people kind of pull back and they just kind of let go. I'm going to kind of sit back and watch and wait. And then other people you kind of see kind of really step out and just kind of try to get involved in anything and everything they can. And then sometimes there's folks that are just kind of in the middle where they pull back and kind of observe and then engage sometimes. And so I really kind of figured that I really kind of felt like when I got to Japan that I was just going to be completely engaged all the time and just really make friends fast and all that kind of stuff. But it took a lot of time and it took effort. And I did find myself kind of from time to time kind of pulling back and pulling up some bilingual TV shows, American TV shows, and just kind of getting lost in those American TV experiences as opposed to kind of really engaging in Japanese culture. So it was really kind of a challenge, actually, kind of getting connected and becoming part of a community. But once it happened, then it kind of started to kind of cascade. Once you kind of build that first friendship, the second one comes a little bit easier. The third one comes. You start to use those close circles to make connections to broader circles of people and places. And so I really kind of learned a lot from the Japan experience, and it really kind of built on what I had kind of learned earlier in my experience as a Peace Corps volunteer.
It is a really good perspective that it's not just, I've been to one country, I've really experienced what culture shock feels like, I'll be right from now. You're saying it was completely different once you went to Japan that second time. So wherever you take yourself of one environment that you're comfortable in, put yourself in a completely new country with people you don't know in a professional environment, it's not so easy just to slide in because it takes all that effort and energy as well.
Yeah, it really does. And it so then it really kind of speaks to the kind of sensitivities and respect that you have to have for other cultures. And they're, obviously cultures are so deep. You've seen the picture of the iceberg, where you have certain aspects of a culture kind of above
That's
the
what we
surface of the
see
water.
from abroad.
Yeah, exactly.
But then
right.
when you really dive into the culture, you understand that it's completely different and so much more going on, so much more complex.
So much more complex. Exactly right. It's just such, and I think what happens particularly, for me as a young person in those days, I kind of felt things should happen quickly and fast. And I guess, again, it's probably just the perspective of age and maturity is just that I learned that things take time. And so if you're willing to give it the time and to realize that that it requires kind of a constant, you're a basketball player,
At least I was.
Well, you still are at heart. And but you to get better at basketball, you have to continue to practice. And I think that you have to engage with the game, if you will. It's the same thing with snowboarding. And it takes a lot of time and a lot of energy over the course of the time. Here's a quick story about that in the context of skiing, snow skiing.
Yeah, go for it.
When we were in Japan, there was an American ski instructor that was working at this ski resort that I just mentioned, Honokidaira. And obviously he was a very accomplished skier. And I was rather much more of a novice, a beginner at that point. And I spent quite a bit of time with him because he was kind of lonely out at this ski resort. My wife and I would go out there and hang with him on the weekends and ski quite a bit. And I just kind of thought, oh, this is a great chance for me to get some free ski lessons, And so one day we were skiing together with this guy and the ski instructor, and I said, hey, you've kind of seen me ski now for a couple of times. Can you give me any instruction? What should I, technique wise, what should I be doing? I mean, can you give me some kind of grand advice on how to become a better skier? And he looked up at me and said, mileage.
Which is such a boring answer. That's not what you want to hear.
Yeah, I mean, so his answer was really quite deep on one sense, but so simple on the other. In another sense, in the sense that mileage in that context meant you just have to ski. The more you ski, the better you'll get. And so I think in some ways there's some applications in that context of living overseas, if that's what you choose to do, in the context of particularly international students coming to the United States to study, or an American student going elsewhere to study or to live or to work. It's that you have to put on some miles. You have to, in the context of skiing, you have to ski. In the context of trying to engage with a community, your new community, if you're coming to Augustana as a new student, mileage translates into going to class, being involved in clubs and activities, engaging with your roommate, talking to professors, both in the context of the classroom, but outside of the classroom in the hallway or in their office.
It really is just, even though you're uncomfortable in that situation, you just have to keep doing the routine things to sort of just build so you can get to a level where you finally do feel comfortable.
Absolutely. And to relate it to skiing, if we can, or snowboarding, how many times have you fallen down?
You fall down so many, especially to begin with.
Exactly right. So
it's just the natural part of what it takes to, progress with snowboarding. But if you're a student coming here, and I've had a lot of students on this podcast who have said when they come, they're very a lot of them are closed off because the sheer just being overwhelmed is very overwhelming, just being in a new context, new environment with people who may not even speak the same language of you. But everyone sort of reflects back on the time, and they would say if they just opened up sooner, they would be able to get out of their discomfort a lot quicker. And I think that's where the mileage comes in, where you just delve yourself into the environment and do the best you can despite being uncomfortable, because that will be how you adjust the best.
Yeah, I totally agree. Sometimes, and I think in retrospect, a lot of students do figure out that, or come to the realization that, yes, I wish I did engage sooner or kind of open up sooner. But sometimes it just comes naturally. I mean, it comes when it's supposed to come. There is kind of a cultural trauma, intellectual trauma, personal trauma when you literally decide to pick yourself up and out of everything that's familiar and comfortable and move to someplace that's new. And most people, at least I thought, when I went into the Peace Corps and when I went to Japan, both times I looked at both of those experiences very romantically, with very rosy colored glasses, as they say, and thinking that everything's going to be fine all the time. It's going to be fun all the time. When in fact, the reality is that there are challenges that come your way all the time. And there's always problems to solve, whether it's problems in the classroom in terms of like just simply a math problem, or any kind of intellectual challenge or learning assignment in the classroom, to trying to figure out those same kinds of challenges outside the classroom in terms of developing friendships, relationships with new friends. How do you do it? How do you make friends in the United States with American students or other international students? Those are, problems that you have to solve. And to solve those kinds of challenges, you have to really kind of work at it.
I'd say even it's personal for each different individual.
Oh,
because people are just naturally different, of course. So you have to find out what works for you. And I think that's exactly where the practice comes in.
Absolutely. I mean, in my experience of working with international students, all of whom kind of are coming to the United States, and very excited to be doing that. Most of them are, when they land at the airport and we pick them up at the airport, they kind of like, they're just kind of looking at, wow, this is cool, just what I dreamed of. They're excited to kind of get on campus and meet people. But I've also picked up a few students at the airport kind of in tears, kind of asking themselves, what was I thinking? Why did I leave home? Why did I think this would be cool? And so the way that people interact or react to the experience of coming to someplace new, regardless of how eager they were before they came, their reaction once they get on campus or once they get to Sioux Falls or to the United States in general, it's so different from person to person. It's a very personal experiences. There are some shared experiences in that whole process across the student population, international student population, or for American students who are studying abroad, there are some shared experiences as well that are very relatable to each other. But at the same time, every person is different and how they experience that process of moving away from home and coming to a new place and trying to make it home. That's a very personal process. Yeah.
I think to me, that culture shock of being in a new environment, I think that's such an amazing challenge, and it's often very rewarding as well. It can be extremely challenging, and like you're saying, there's some students that come sort of just in tears just for being completely out of place. But I think it's once you can learn to get through those experiences where you can really grow and find a lot about yourself as well.
Yeah, and I think most students are coming to the United States thinking that I'm going to learn a lot about uh, my subject areas that I
In the
want to study
classroom.
in the classroom. I'm going to learn a lot about American culture. But in fact, I think as you're kind of suggesting, what you probably learn more about is about yourself and kind of who you are and how you manage circumstances and situations, how you manage challenging circumstances, how you manage stress, um, how you manage emotions, because it's a very emotional experience to live elsewhere. Life goes on here as it does back home. There are events back home, as I was kind of talking about with my own experience in Nepal, with kind of the uh, health experience that my own father was having while I was away. Those kinds of moments can weigh heavily on you when you're living far away. When my wife and I were living in Japan, our grandparents passed away, and so you deal with all these kinds of life experiences regardless of where you are, and so then the kind of context that you're in when all those kinds of things happen really kind of impacts how you experience where you're at the moment. And so I think so I think the nice thing about Augustana University, and particularly the staff in the International Programs Office, as well as faculty and staff at the university, I think they all realize that life happens to all of us, no matter where we are or where we're from, and we're here to kind of support each other. And so when those kinds of challenging life experiences come about, I think we're all there to kind of support each other. And then not just on the challenging side, also kind of the joys and all the fun experiences, because there's a lot more of those that go on at a college campus as well. And so it's just really nice to kind of be a part of, from my experience, to be a part of a young person's experience on Augustana's campus, to kind of watch them kind of grow, move through the challenging times, but also to celebrate all the achievements and accomplishments that they've had.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it seems like a really rewarding job. So, and after your two big experiences overseas, both in Nepal and in Japan, how did you actually end up starting here at Augustana?
Oh, well, so again, when my wife and I came back from Japan, we were going through that transition process again, because we had just spent 2 wonderful years in Japan. And we came back. We were kind of thinking about moving back to Denver at the time. And but my mother was living here. My father had passed away, actually just literally about a year after I came back from the Peace Corps. But my mother was living in Sioux Falls. My wife's family was living in Iowa. So we thought, well, we'd been away. We came back like in October. We'd been away for a couple of Thanksgivings and a couple of Christmases now because of our time in Japan. So we thought, well, let's just kind of hang out in the Midwest and spend time with family. So we both got part-time jobs to kind of take us through the Thanksgiving, Christmas season. Then we were really planning to move to Denver after the new year. But then after the new year, my wife got a job in the Sioux Falls School District that would take her through the rest of the semester teaching English as a second language. I continued to work part-time jobs. Kristen got another contract for the following year. Late in the spring, I continued to look for some work, and I applied for a part-time job at Augustana down in the Elman Center with my friend Mark Hecht.
Oh, there you go.
Who I think you also may have on a podcast, either before me or after me. But anyway, so I went up and interviewed with Mark and his wife Carmen, who were in charge of the Elman Center. They didn't hire me.
No way.
Yeah, no way. Can you believe that?
Got rejected.
Yeah. Mark, of course, Mark and Carmen are dear friends. But I've always, of course, kiddingly reminded Mark that he missed out on hiring me for working with him. But anyway.
You could have spent a 30-year career in the Elman Center.
In the Elman Center, exactly right, in recreational sports. But instead, in that process of that job interview, the human resources vice president asked if I had heard that we also have an open position in the International Student Advising Office. And I said, no, I hadn't seen that one. And she says, well, I want you to come back then and interview for this other position as well. So I came back and interviewed it was a full-time position, half-time as international student advisor and a residence hall director. So got lucky enough then. So I do thank Mark and Carmen for the opportunity to if that open position had been in the newspaper, I wouldn't have ever found the opportunity to come to Augustana. But,
and for them knocking you back, I think it was just clear that they maybe saw that you had skills better destined for another area as well.
No, I think they just found a much better candidate for who they wanted.
Okay. Well, there you go. So it almost happened by accident that you ended up here then.
In one sense it did, yeah. It's kind of one of those deals where sometimes doors of opportunity open up. And so then there's kind of a need to kind of be open to walking into that, because that particular kind of job profile, working in college administration, half-time international student advisor, half-time on-campus residence hall director, living in a residence hall with students as a hall director, had never appeared on my radar screen in terms of
that's
careers.
What I want to do.
Yeah, exactly right. But when the opportunity came, like I said, my wife Kristen had already accepted the opportunity to kind of work in the Sioux Falls School District for another year, and so I said yes, and so we moved on campus. So we lived on campus for 2 years.
In a dorm?
Yeah, in East Hall, exactly right.
Really?
So I had an apartment in East Hall and lived there for 2 years, and then after that 2 years, there was another guy at Augustana who was the director of study abroad, Dr. John Bilsma, who became a mentor of mine while I was here in my young career as an administrator. He was actually the registrar of the university, and also the study abroad director. And he was just so busy that he really wanted to kind of peel off that study abroad position. And so he asked if I would be interested in that. And I said, absolutely. By that time I had lived abroad in Nepal, lived abroad in Japan. And so the opportunity to kind of work with other young people to help them have live abroad, study abroad experiences just was really...
You already had that experience.
Yeah.
I knew what it was like.
Exactly right. Knew what it was like. And then at that point, I had also had, at that point, 2 years of administrative experience working with international students coming this way, and helping them kind of land on their feet and figure out the American higher ed culture, and the culture of Sioux Falls and the U.S. generally speaking, that I thought, working with outbound students would be equally as rewarding as it was. And so that happened after 2 years here. And so my wife and I moved off campus, and that's really kind of when I became the director of, the international program. So I was really kind of at that point then working with recruiting international students, welcoming international students to the Augie campus, supporting them while they were here, and then working with students who were interested in studying abroad.
So kind of doing everything at that point.
Yeah, at that point, I really kind of became, as kind of the director of the IPO, then I kind of became in charge of everything. Of course, when I say that, this work that you do as a college or university administrator is always, you're one part of a team. Because to study abroad or to welcome international students to a university campus, it really is teamwork. Because you're working with, on the inbound side, you're working with the housing staff, the billing and business office, with the academic affairs staff, with faculty. You're just working across the institution. And so really kind of when I look back on what I would describe as a very successful career in international education, there were at times when I kind of felt like a one-person office in terms of kind of the number of staff that were in the IPO at the time, which was for about 15 years. Sometimes it felt like a one-person office, but in reality, you are always one piece of a team trying to welcome international students to campus, and then in the same thing with study abroad, helping American students study overseas. You're just one part of a larger process. But yeah, it's been been a great career.
I think it's great that you've shared all of that, because it really shows what goes into the International Programs Office. It's a huge operation, really, and especially now since it's grown so much, welcoming 100 and how many students I think the record was? I don't know. There's
this year we have, I think, 214 international students on campus.
Amazing.
That's probably 50 to 60 more, perhaps when you were a full-time student at Augustana.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, and it's a challenging. It takes a commitment by the entire university to welcome 10 to 12, 15% of your.
It's not just as simple as flicking out an email to someone in another country and saying, "Hey, do you want to come here?" Oh yeah, sure, that's good. There's so much that goes into that.
Yeah, it's really that simple. You're right, exactly right.
And so I'm curious, Donn, what was the IPO like back in the 90s when you stepped into that director's role?
Oh, I mean, again, it was a small office in the sense that for about 15 years, I was kind of a one-person office, kind of, again, as I mentioned, working with some recruiting responsibilities, international recruiting responsibilities. And then once the international students got on campus, helping to welcome them to campus, making sure that they felt comfortable here and connected, networked, if you will.
So it would have been a pretty small operation. Like, how many students would you have been bringing in each year?
Yeah, good question. So probably in the mid-1990s, we probably had about 45 to 50 international students. And then on the outbound...
That's still quite a lot.
Yeah, I mean, for a one-person office, it was a good number. And then on the outbound, in terms of kind of the study abroad, I suppose we were sending about the same number of international or American students overseas, 50 to 60 per year. And then probably about 15 years in, when I had the opportunity to hire kind of a second colleague directly involved in international stuff, that was Ben Iverson. At that point, the international student population was still probably in that 45 to 60 students area. But the study abroad side had grown quite a bit. We were probably sending anywhere from 150 to 200 American students overseas. And that's when the job, in a sense, kind of got too big for one person trying to do it all, if you will. I was able to add another staff member, Ben Iverson. He'd been
What a great hire.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. He'd been an Augustana student, had been an intern in my office. And so then together, and really with Ben's skills and his own experiences, we were really able then to kind of grow both sides again. The study abroad, outbound side grew, but then so did the international student population grew. So I think the next year we had 75 to 80 international students. And then in the second year of being a two-person office, we kind of grew it to about 100 students, and we added a third person on our staff. And every time we added a staff member, one would hope, with additional resources, human resources in this context, we were able to kind of continue to grow things. So by the time I left then in 2018, the IPO team had grown to 5 staff members. I was the director. Ben, Heather, Reed, Aaron Kane were also staff members.
And Phil Mulder was there, I think.
Phil Mulder came.
Because he was the one that sort of recruited me
of course,
and helped me along. Yeah.
Phil, great guy. So Phil was on the staff for a couple of years, exactly right. He's an Augustana graduate as well. Had spent a number of years in China, came back and worked with us on the international recruiting side for a couple of years, and then returned to China. He's married to a beautiful young Chinese woman, and together they have a new baby just recently.
Oh, do they?
And
congratulations,
yeah,
Phil. That's
exactly
exciting.
Right. Phil Mulder's a great guy. Consider him a close colleague as well. He works in the area of international education as well as a guidance counselor, working at some high schools in China. And so he's kind of continuing in that same kind of professional track, working with young people who are interested in learning about other places in the world. So, yeah.
That's so awesome. And it's great that you've shared that experience where it almost just feels like a startup when you're in your office, windows shut, just working away, just trying to recruit students. And you eventually acquired Ben to help you out with some things, and then you've just sort of expanded from there. And I think just the evolution of that and the staff that you've attracted too, because all the staff are genuinely amazing people and they're so interested in caring for the students.
Yeah.
And it just becomes even more evident when I've come back after like 3 years later, just being welcomed by everyone, and they just really care about the students that they work with and do anything that they can to help them out as well.
Yeah.
So it's a huge testament to you and all your hard work.
Yeah. I mean, if I've done one thing, if I did one thing during my tenure as the director of the International Programs Office, it was to hire good people. Kathy Lindemood was our third hire after Ben passed away from cancer 4 or 5 years ago by now. Aaron Kane, Heather Reed, Jessica Fautek, Roseanne Reinhardt. These are all Phil Mulder. I didn't hire Wade. Wade was already at Augustana in the domestic admission side, but I really kind of look back on all of those folks as very close friends. They were all committed to the success of students, so engaging in the lives of young people, young college students, and wanting, all of whom have also had their own international experiences, so they all knew what it has meant to study a second language, a third language in some cases, to live overseas for a period of time, trying to become a connected member of a new community. And so they all get it. They all understand what new international students are, all the challenges that they're going to be confronted with and faced with. And same thing with outbound students as well, trying to help prepare them for a successful study abroad experience. So all the staff in the IPO, they're just all such genuinely good people that are very interested in the success of everybody that kind of crosses the threshold of the IPO door and the university campus. So.
And very much a student first sort of operation where the doors are always open. So if there is a student on campus that needs some help, you can just run in there and get your visa signed so you can go back home for the school year or anything, any troubles that you're having, even just someone to talk to as well. And because I feel like the administration work, that can be pushed aside, but the whole goal of the IPO is to be a community and to make students feel safe and have the best possible experience they can here in the US.
Yeah, exactly right. I think Aaron Kane and Heather Reed and Umema and Kelsey are the current staff of the IPO. They're so committed to that philosophy that you just talked about. And before that, Ben and Wade and Phil and Roseanne, Jessica, Kathy Lindemood, all of them have been just such good people and really committed to kind of the success of everybody that walks into the door. So I think you're right. I think anytime that someone walks into the office, regardless of what they were doing at the moment in terms of kind of an administrative task, they were willing just to kind of lay things down and greet people warmly and welcome them to the office, and then to kind of figure out what's up. And so sometimes it's celebrating a good grade on a test or a final grade in a class. Sometimes it might be good news from home, but sometimes it's those challenges too, where I think the staff and the IPO are always ready to kind of just stop and listen and try to figure out how we can be of support to an international student or to an American student who's really kind of either at the beginning stages of their exploration of their study abroad journey, or perhaps they've come back and experienced kind of what we call re-entry shock. You know, they've had this great experience in France or India or South America somewhere, and now they're back on campus after a month study abroad or a semester
we have the
abroad.
most life-changing experience ever, and then you come back to reality. It really just hits you.
It really can. Yeah, the whole what we call re-entry culture shock, whether it's an American study abroad student who's been away for some period of time and coming back and kind of seeing their own lives, their own culture in a different light, or whether it's an international student who's been here for a semester exchange program or for a degree like yourself, and then you go back home and you kind of look at home very differently. that reentry process is as challenging as it is to come in the first place. To kind of go home and try to fit in again.
Oh, yeah.
Even though you've changed your perspectives. I mean, do you have any stories to share with us?
Well, I was just going to say personal experience. I think when I graduated here and went back home, I feel like the last 3.5 years have been I've spent a lot of time by myself, just sort of at home living with my mum.
Yeah.
And I feel like when I reflect on that, I was a completely different person when I was here in the US.
Yeah.
And that's why I kind of caught myself like, well, what are you doing with your life? Because, I mean, you're just such an outgoing, expressive person while I was here in the US. And then all of a sudden I've gone back home. And to be fair, we did go straight back into
COVID and lockdowns, all that kind of
But I think
stuff.
Even out of that, I've sort of kept those habits. And I feel like I really had to get out of that environment to really change. And that's why I've really enjoyed coming back.
Yeah.
And I feel like I sort of am living the life that I want to while I'm here.
Yeah.
So I think it's again sort of reignited a lot of perspective for me as well.
Yeah. 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 No, again, when I kind of look at you and what you've been doing these last couple of weeks here in Sioux Falls, but even online before you came back in terms of your podcasts and all of that work that you're doing, to me, it seems like you found a very good fit for a career and a pathway.
Well,
I'm as excited.
The whole month I've been in the US, I've just loved every minute of it. And it's been tough. I mean, to set up all this gear every time and to tear it down, it takes so much time and energy.
Yeah.
And not to mention actually conducting the conversations and trying to think of thoughtful questions.
Yeah.
But just connecting with all like my best friends who I made over here, it's just been the best thing ever.
Yeah. No, I mean, You've got this, to me, it seems like you've found a niche and you've found a career that I think will take you a long ways. And I can just kind of tell the way that you kind of handle yourself and the kind of joy I see when you talk to these other friends. But not only in your Back to College podcast series, but some of your previous work that I've seen online. I think you've got the skills and talents for this industry. And so I'm very excited for you. And then again, that comes back to part of the meaningful experience that I've had in my own career at Augustana is not just to kind of successfully help students successfully help students fit in and make themselves home. But then when students kind of go beyond campus, they graduate and they move on to other stages of life, it's a great joy to kind of watch students like yourself find your way, find a career, find a passion, if you will.
Yeah, thank you so much.
And to watch your success.
I can see myself easily doing this for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting now because I used to force like so hard, I've got to be a professional basketball, that's what I have to do. But then when I really look at it, I don't know if I really enjoyed basketball like nearly to the same level as I enjoy all this podcasting video stuff and filmmaking. Yeah. Just because I think I was good at basketball, I sort of fell into that. Yeah. So I just imagined, hey, I have to try and make this work. But trying to force it, it ended up not working out. Yeah. But with this, it does seem fairly effortless, and just because of the sheer joy that I have and the fulfillment that it brings me as well. Like being able to share awesome conversations, which we've had so far, and all the other students that I've had on as well. Yeah. I just feel really called to share what this experience and how I've really changed at Augustana and what it really meant to me. Yeah, no, absolutely. And again, you may find that this is your thing for 3 years, 5 years. It could be 15 or 20 years. I mean, again, when I got into higher ed administration back in 1992, again, it had never appeared on my radar screen. And all of a sudden, 26 years later, I find myself going, wow, that was a great run. Stepped away for 5 years. Now I'm back. And I'm looking forward to another fun run for a couple more years. And yeah, you just never know how far it'll take you at the time. But you're already the kind of person that's kind of open to new doors and new opportunities. So I think this is going to take you quite a ways, but who knows what door will open next, door of opportunity. And I think, reflecting on that even more, I think even with all this content creation stuff, I sort of thought that I had to do it a certain way again. Yeah. But then when I sort of let go and, well, what do I really like and what am I passionate about? Well, I was passionate about my time here. Yeah. So once I started incorporating that into a podcast, that's where it just sort of snowballing out of control. And now I'm just just right into it. I've done, I think, over 20 episodes since I've been in the US, which is completely bonkers.
Yeah.
But I just get completely obsessed with it.
Yeah, that's very cool. I'm very excited to see some of your work as it gets published.
Oh yeah, can't wait to release all these episodes.
But as you know, all the hard work is yet to come.
Totally.
I mean, now and you've given me some insight into that. I don't know much about podcasting, but I just know on the editorial side, the amount of hours that you'll spend to kind of take an experience like this and put it into a podcast that you'll publish. All the hard work now is ahead of you with all these projects.
So I've got a huge bank of work to get through. So.
Exactly right.
And I think, I mean, it could be, I could just set up a couple of mics and just call it a day, and we wouldn't actually have to film it or anything like that. But just with all the skills I've acquired, I really love the whole cinematic feel to things, and actually being in locations like the Hamray Recital Hall.
Yeah.
It really just brings it back, and I'm trying to create that feeling like, hey, we are actually back at college and really walking through that experience to share with other people too.
Yeah, no, this is a great venue for our performing arts programs, and it's kind of a cool place to do a podcast. That's for darn sure. And
I wanted to have you front and center stage as well, so I think it was very fitting.
Yeah, exactly. I spent some time on stages. You know, as you mentioned, my undergraduate degree, which is kind of a testament to the liberal arts. You can kind of pursue two different areas of passion. And so I had an interest in the sciences, therefore biology, but also in theater. So at the time at Dakota Wesleyan, the
works
major
out
was
perfectly.
communication theater.
You're back on the stage.
Did some stuff on stage.
And so now after this 5-year break you had, you went to work for your brother for a little while.
I did.
But you've come back, and you're the Director of International Programs Admission. So that's all the recruiting.
Yeah, the formal title is Director of International Admission.
That's it, yeah.
And so I'm really kind of located in the admission office with the rest of the admission team. So everybody in the admission office really is working beyond the borders of the campus. So on the domestic side, we're reaching across the country, really trying to recruit new domestic students to come to campus. And then myself, Liz Fossum, and Bryn Heinert are specifically tasked with recruiting students beyond the borders of the U.S. In different international contexts, and trying to bring, our goal really is to have 10 to 12% of our student body to be international. I think we have 52 countries represented on campus at the moment.
Oh, right.
And so
that's a lot of countries.
Yeah, exactly right. It is. Yeah. Bryn Heinert does some of our domestic recruiting as well, and then she's got Canada and Mexico. I primarily have the territories in Southeast Asia, so India, Nepal, Bangladesh, Pakistan, China as well. And then Liz Fossum kind of has the rest of the world. She's got a bigger chunk of bigger
You can
chunk.
take the rest, Liz.
Yeah, you got the rest, Liz. Yeah, exactly right.
Well, the 10 to 12% of the student body you want to have as international students, why is that important?
Well, I mean, what does a university do? A university really kind of prepares young people, in the case of Augustana University, although we do have some non-traditional aged students, but we're really trying to prepare young people to become citizens not only of their own community, not only of their own country, but of the world. The world is so interconnected. And so I think at Augustana University, we have this great value of understanding the world in the context of what that might mean to bring international students to campus, and for American students to develop these friendships with international students on a very kind of interpersonal level. And that's the same reason we have our study abroad programs, is because we want American students to go across the seas or to our neighbor countries to study off campus, to learn what it's like to be a citizen of the world, if you will. And so the institution has had this long time commitment to this process. And so it's very important for the student body to be diverse, not only diverse in terms of where our students are coming from across the U.S., but from across the world. So I think that the institution has always had this as a kind of a core value to be international, if you will. And so I think that's part of the reason that the institution invests so much in terms of resources, in terms of our recruiting efforts to bring students here, in terms of resources to send faculty, staff, and students abroad, but then in terms of kind of international students to support them when they're on campus. So it's always been a long-term value of the institution.
I think it is really important too. And when I look back on my time at college, all my strongest friends are international students.
Yeah.
Which I think isn't by accident. I think having that shared experience of going to a different country and just trying to figure it out with one another, especially jumping straight into the orientation and going to the Black Hills and sort of bonding over that first 2 weeks where it is just completely new for you. I think that's where those really strong connections have come from.
Yeah, absolutely. We really do think that the first 10 days, 2 weeks, first semester is really such an important, critical time in an international student's experience here that we invest a lot of resources in that process. We really want students to become, it's again, like I say, it's really kind of how can you help new students to a campus connect with at first a small circle of friends, if you will, but then to leverage those networks of friendships to build kind of a second tier of friendships and experiences here. And so it's really kind of continuing over a period of time to kind of develop these concentric circles of friendships and experiences, and to kind of build on that. And so those first 10 days, that week of orientation, going out to the Black Hills, as you've suggested, can be a very meaningful, impactful time of a new student's life, without a doubt. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
And so I want to ask, Don, how does international recruiting actually work? What do you specifically do in order to get students to come here?
Yeah, like I say, there's a lot of different methodologies that universities employ to try to appear on a student's radar screen. Because obviously, even for yourself, for students in China, for students in India, for students all over Africa and Latin America, how do they find out about this small liberal arts university in Sioux Falls, South Dakota? So we do a number of different things. First of all, the U.S. government has a number of advising centers all throughout the world. They're typically based out of a U.S. embassy in that particular country, or there's something called the United States Education Foundation or Education USA Advising Center in countries all over the world. So we use that network of offices. Also, students that are planning to come to the United States are oftentimes taking certain kinds of tests, whether they are SAT, ACT exams, or English proficiency exams like the IELTS exam, or the TOEFL exam, or now the Duolingo exam, and some other English proficiency exams. They're really taking those English proficiency exams in part because they intend to come to the United States to study. So all of those organizations basically sell information. So we can get, a student has to say, when they sign up for the SAT exam or a TOEFL exam, they have to agree to be able to let their name be shared with institutions. And so most American universities are purchasing names. It's kind of the shorthand, but really what we're doing is we're purchasing not only a student's name, but their email address. And so then we put together rather complex and comprehensive emailing campaigns to reach out to those students. And then over the course of time, as a student expresses their interest in our outreach, we start to engage in kind of a more meaningful conversation with them about Augustana as a university, Sioux Falls as a city to live in, South Dakota as a destination within the United States. And we really kind of help them build their understanding of what they might be experiencing, what they might be buying, if you will, when they decide to choose to come here. So it really kind of goes from, if you will, kind of a very initial and very from a very how would I describe it, as a very initial interaction by email to trying to develop a much more complex and mature relationship or intimate relationship with a prospective student, if you will.
Yeah,
So
okay.
that they know what they're getting themselves into. We really want them. We don't want them just to come. We don't want them to come as a number or as a student who's going to be a revenue source. We really want the student to find that Augustana is a good fit, academically speaking, and meets their expectations, because we want students to be happy and satisfied with their academic journey once they're on campus. Much better experience for us when they know what they're getting themselves into.
Well,
So.
I think that's really important, that it's not just get as many into the door as possible, because I mean, the world is a massive place. There's lots of students looking to study in the US, but you want the ones that are going to be a right fit. So I think building that connection seems like a really smart option. And I think it's a good perspective for me, just to realize that it's people who are kind of generally looking to come to the US as sort of the ones where you sort of pluck from to sort of just say, hey, like, we're here and we really want you to come.
Yeah, no, exactly right. And but it takes a lot of effort to try to get to that point where a student would finally get to a point to say, yeah, I think Augustana does sound like a good fit. The city of Sioux Falls seems like a safe place to study, and there's lots of opportunities beyond the university campus, that I can find engaging opportunities to extend my learning experiences. And cost-wise, we tend to be more affordable than schools on either of the West Coast or the East Coast, for a variety of reasons.
A lot of students on this podcast have mentioned that they've said a deciding factor was just that they could get an affordability from Augustana while still being able to go to an amazing college.
Yeah, and I think, our biggest challenge is always to remind students that have never heard about Augustana is that, in terms of U.S. higher education, the quality of an experience that you're going to have at Augustana University, an institution that they may not have heard about yet, it's on the same level as what I would describe as much more famous, quote unquote, famous universities. In the United States, you have this equality of equality of quality. Does that make sense? That doesn't sound right. But anyway, there's this quality standard across higher education, which kind of ensures that if a student comes to Augustana University and gets a bachelor's degree, earns a bachelor's degree, they're going to have the same access to opportunities in terms of their career, their first career, I'll say, but also access to further education, whether they plan to go on to get a master's degree or a PhD degree after Augustana. So there's a certain quality that is persistent across the U.S. higher education system that a student who's never heard of Augustana University may discover in the context of these email exchanges or phone calls, video calls these days, of course, that the quality of education that they're going to get at Augustana University and the cost is a much better fit for them than it may be at some other more quote-unquote famous universities.
Yeah,
that cost quite a bit.
Well, I think it's such a great point of difference to have.
Yeah, absolutely. I think so too. Yeah, indeed.
And I know that you also do a lot of in-person recruiting too, because I think when we were messaging earlier this semester, you were actually in India doing some in-person recruiting. So how does that whole actually actively going to different countries, how does that sort of recruiting work?
Yeah, so I did jump right back in that sense. I started, as a result of returning to Augustana University, I started on October 2nd, a Monday. And then on that Saturday, I hopped on an airplane to India and spent 2 weeks in India recruiting. That wouldn't be necessarily the most common kind of experience for a new recruiter. But given my previous 26 years at the university,
I've done this before. I've got this, guys. I'm just jumping on the plane.
In that sense, exactly right. But yeah, so in that context, when we travel overseas, Liz Fossum has done that. Bryn has done it mostly on the domestic side, but we're always visiting high schools or advising centers. In the international context, there are education agencies that help students find their way to other places around the world. And so we're doing outreach prior to the trip to make sure that we have appointments at high schools to be able to kind of present. So while I was in India, I think I went to probably 10 different high schools and did presentations, sometimes to an audience that would have filled this room, just really kind of talking about American higher education, but then specifically about Augustana University, and then kind of hanging out after a presentation to a group of students this big and talking to prospective students that were interested in specifically about Augustana University, but then same thing at advising centers and agencies. It's really trying to make connections with students and their families because in most countries, I would have to say the decision to study abroad is really a family decision. It comes with a great deal of support from parents, typically. Not always, but typically it comes with great support from parents for their son or daughter to study overseas. So there's a lot of engagement in that context with families as well to try to kind of answer the questions that they have about the quality of the education that their son or daughter is going to get at Augustana, safety of the community, of course, and then just all the logistics of getting there and hopefully coming back, either for, school breaks and vacations, that kind of stuff.
Yeah. And I think an interesting insight into just some of the work that you do to try and recruit people and really build those strong connections in order to just convey what Augustana has to offer. I've noticed, because I've been hanging out in the Welcome Center for the last couple of weeks.
Yeah.
But you'll still jump on calls face-to-face with prospective students when I feel like you could very much easily delegate that to someone else, but you personally do still jump on these calls.
Yeah, it's the best part of the job, to be quite honest with you. I'm very happy to engage via email and all those other kind of electronic methodologies, but I really find the most meaning in kind of real personal experiences. And so the whole technology deal with Zoom meetings, Google Meet meetings, to be able to kind of literally see somebody's reaction and to answer their questions and kind of see, what body language looks like when they're asking questions or when family members join the call. That's really the most meaningful and it's the best way. It's the best way to kind of connect with people to see, because then you can kind of see if you're making a connection or if there's some confusion. And because, look, again, as you've recognized already, the complexity of that decision-making process to come to a different country and to select a university, it's a very complex decision. And so I think that there's some great advantages to be on video calls. And so, yeah, just this last week, or actually the last 2 or 3 weeks, I've probably have been on 20 different video calls with prospective students. Yeah,
wow.
Easily that many. And this week again, this coming week after the New Year's holiday, I have another half a dozen already lined up for this coming week. And so almost all of them are with new prospective students.
And I think that's incredibly important. And I've discovered this through the podcast as well, is a lot of people were a bit unsure where they were going to study in the US, but then they would have Wade or Ben just come and talk to them, or Phil.
Yep.
Just come and talk to them.
Yeah.
And they just said, they just made me feel heard and like a real person, and they showed genuine care, and that's ended up why they made their decision to come here.
Yeah. And if I can, so as I've come back and have visited with the current cohort of international students that are on campus, when I've asked most of them or most of those who I've talked to about this process to say, hey, why are you here at Augustana University? A lot of them said, yeah, Wade Gaymar is the reason I'm here. Ben Iverson is the reason I'm here. Or in your instance, Phil Mulder is the reason I'm here. That's the primary message. And so what the takeaway for me is the importance of having, let me use a Nepali reference, but to have a Sherpa. If you're going to go into the mountains of Nepal, into the Himalayas, you want a guide, an experienced guide who's going to lead you down the right path, introduce you to the culture, remind you of the challenges that lie ahead of you in terms of climbing a tall mountain, keeping you safe in some ways. And so I really do think that what a very important role in this job that I have now and the others that have had it alongside me or before me is to really kind of think of yourself as a Sherpa. You're really there to kind of help students find their way, if you will. to help them make good decisions. Not only, yeah, of course, we're also here to kind of make sure that the students that we're inviting to campus are going to be good community members. But really, in the end, like you said, it's about being student-centered and student-focused, is to help students make sure that the decision that they're making to come to Augustana University is good for them. And so I think that's the role that I can play now, that Ben Iverson played, that Wade Gaymar played, that Phil Mulder played in the lives of other people, is to be that person who's kind of helped them, help guide them to this decision. And so, so I think that's, so it's an important role, important task in the whole process.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think just the personal touch means so much. It goes such a long way.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's what, so as I kind of get to know my colleagues in the international admission office now, Liz Foss and Bryn Heinert, and also on the domestic side, it's fun for me to kind of watch all these professionals do their thing in terms of kind of helping students figure out, make decisions, get the information they need to make those decisions to come to Augustana University. Augustana, I think, does the professionals that are in the admissions office, either on the domestic side or the international side, it's fun to be a part of that team.
So, Donn, this is my staple for the podcast. I always ask this question.
Yeah.
But I like to, because we're at a college, I think it's important. We get graded all the time on different things.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to ask your overall Augustana experience. If you were to give that a letter grade, what would it be?
Well, for me, because I've been here, 26 years, I watched the institution from a distance for 5 years. These last 5 years as I've worked for a family company, and now to be back, I mean, I give it a strong A. And certainly there are things that the beauty for me now after this long tenure at Augustana University is to understand the role of change. You have to remember that every 4 years, there's a completely new cohort of students.
Oh, I know. I've been walking around campus. I don't recognize anyone.
You don't recognize anybody, do you? But that even happens on an even shorter time frame, because there's always a senior class that's taking off, and there's a new first-year cohort of students coming in. And that first-year cohort completely changes the nature of the institution. So for me, I've been able to kind of watch change happen on an annual basis, but over a long period of time. And so every institution has its challenges, and certainly Augustana has as well. And so to kind of watch that process of change over the course of really kind of now 3 decades, as you indicated, those first 26 years plus another 5 years, 30 some years, it's been fun to kind of watch Augustana University change. From Augustana College to Augustana University is one of those changes. And then to watch students kind of enter and leave, and to watch them confront or engage with the university as it is now in their own time. There's always challenges. But for me, in terms of a career, I give it an A+. That doesn't mean there haven't been downsides. That doesn't mean there aren't challenges that have kind of made me kind of question, where are we going as an institution, or where am I going as a professional in that context? Because that's just how life is. There's good days and there's bad days, but in the end, for me, it's been an A+ experience from start to finish.
Well, it makes sense that you even sort of thought, oh, I'll change your gears a little bit and I'll try something different, but then somehow you're back. So obviously you just love it. So I think an A+ is very fitting.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so, Donn, I wanted to sort of ask you, like, what is the future of the IPO and Augustana looking like? Because Augustana's trying to build to 2030 Division 1. And I mean, there's been a lot of change since I've been here. The new ice hockey stadium, new dorm room. So the campus is growing. And I want to ask you, well, how is the IPO changing and adapting to in accordance with that?
Yeah. Well, the IPO itself, the IPO office is under new leadership with Aaron Kane and Heather Reed, and they have an incredible vision for what's kind of coming next. They're working on some projects that were also started the last 5 years under Ben's leadership, in terms of thinking about kind of what we call a center for global engagement. It kind of takes everything that we're doing at Augustana University to a new level in terms of the kind of the international, intercultural sphere, really trying to figure out new ways to engage students, American students, in study abroad opportunities, but also new ways to enrich the on-campus and off-campus experience that international students have. You can do that a little bit differently in the context of what we call a center for global engagement. And so I think with Heather and Aaron leading that charge and developing that vision, I'm very excited for where the university is going to be going in terms of international programs, opportunities, that kind of thing. My role these days is less on the side of I'm supporting Heather and Aaron in kind of their dreams and their vision in that context. My role really is to try to figure out how I can take that vision that they have and that the university has, and to really kind of translate that into a lot of different foreign languages, if you will, although through the context of the English language medium, but then to translate that and to extend the invitation to international students all over the world to say, there's some really exciting things going on here at Augustana University on the international, intercultural stage, and we want to invite you to be a part of that. So, I'm very excited about the visions that Aaron and Heather have for the IPO itself and for the institution as kind of administrative leaders in that context. And I'm here I'm a cheerleader, I'm a supporter, and then I'm also trying to figure out how I can help populate those visions with students. That's really my main role.
That sounds so exciting.
Yeah, it really is.
It sounds completely epic.
Yeah.
What the IPO is trying to accomplish.
I think so too.
I think from when sort of you first started to what it's grown now, it's just going to keep ramping up more and more. We're not going to just settle and just be like, oh, this is okay. We just want more and more students to experience life here at Augustana.
Yeah, and again, I kind of talk about that as an administrator, and in the context of working with Heather and Aaron in this context of as administrators, but we're really part of a team. And really what drives those visions is the faculty, the professors here at Augustana University, because that's really what students are coming for. I mean, of course, international students develop a dependence and a very strong relationship with, their recruiter, and then the international programs office is the first point of contact during orientation. But really, international students are coming here for the academic program. They're coming here for the bachelor's degree in most cases, but also our master's degrees, our growing master's and graduate programs. And so what Heather and Aaron are doing now in terms of envisioning this center for global engagement is really a conversation with the faculty and other staff members on campus to really try to figure out how can we continue to develop this vision and the activities that we're doing, the learning experiences for not only international students, but American students coming to campus. And so I think maybe in this context already in our conversation, I probably have failed to mention appropriately the role that all of the professors on campus make in terms of kind of the impact that Augustana University has on international students and American students who study abroad. Because all of the students that are coming here, they're really coming here because of the academic program that we have and the academic experience. And to a person, when I kind of think about my friends and colleagues in the classroom teaching, it is really, I'm proud to be their colleague on the administrative side of things, because what they do in the classroom to challenge students to learn, to bring students to a level of competence within a discipline, and to help them launch their first career. It's really an amazing experience for me to be a colleague, a team member in that process. And so really the work that faculty do with international students once they arrive on campus, same thing with American students who study abroad. I mean, again, the university exists primarily for the relationship between faculty and student, teacher and student. So I'm just so proud to be a part of the Augustana University experience that students have in the classroom that I just have to spend more time talking about that, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
No, it's very great to bring that up.
Yeah.
And it is just such a big community and just very tight-knit community as well. And everyone really just thrives off each other. And it's ultimately the people and the connections that students make with their professors and also just faculty as well that makes this place really special.
Exactly right. No, indeed, I think so too.
And Don, I wanted to ask you if, since we're here, center stage, I'm going to open up the mic to you. If you could give some advice or some words of wisdom for a prospective student who is thinking about studying in the US and potentially studying at Augustana, what would you say to them?
Well, I think the great advantage that I have as someone working at an American institution is, again, we talked a little bit about this, the consistent quality of the American university experience across the country, really. And so I can speak from great confidence that, students who are considering coming to the United States, very generally speaking, are going to have a very positive experience. Some of those students are coming because the quality here in the United States perhaps is better than it is back home. In other instances, students are coming to the United States because there just aren't enough seats in the university. There's more graduating high school seniors than there are opportunities to earn entrance into a university back home. So in one sense, they're kind of pushed out of their own country to come and study in the United States. And for those students that are in that particular situation too, I think that they have great opportunities here. And so I'm excited for any student that's interested in coming to the United States. And again, partly because of my own experiences post-graduation of living in Nepal and Japan. I just think that I'm very much an internationalist in that context.
Oh, yeah.
And so I'm very excited for students to, no matter where they're coming from, to be able to come here and study either at Augustana or in the United States, very generally speaking. And so, but it takes homework. They have to do their homework on where they want to go and to make sure that they're finding a good fit for themselves. So I don't know if that answers your question fully, but I'm just very eager for international students to
just get over here.
Yeah, just get over here, if you will. Yeah,
and just experience what the US has to offer.
Exactly right.
And ideally, Sioux Falls, if it's a good fit for you.
Yeah, and not that I think that the American higher education system is the best in the world, or it would be the best experience for everybody, but it's certainly a great opportunity for students that are interested in pursuing this opportunity. So I think there's a lot of great reasons for students to stay in their own country as well. So particularly in certain disciplines, it's hard to get into. I mean, if you want to study law, for example, in your home country, there's really no reason to come to the United States to study law because the bar exams are different here than the laws are different here as they are in the as they are back home. Perhaps same thing with medicine. The medical education system here is so very different in terms of your entrance into the medical school system is very different in the United States than it is compared back home. So there's some very good reasons to stay home as well, depending upon the discipline.
But I guess what I would add too from my own experience is that the classroom, all this stuff was great here, and it really did set me up academically for, the current work that I'm doing now, even though it's not directly correlated, but all those business skills have definitely come in handy the last couple of years, just starting my own business, doing some freelancing. But I think it's college in the US as an international student is so much more than just the classroom. And it's just all the experience that we're talking about, the culture shock, everything that just comes together. And it's ultimately why I'm so passionate about sharing all the stories from international students is because we've just had, for the most part, the greatest time ever here. And I know for myself, I've had the best 4 years of my life here. And that's why I wanted to share all of that. Yeah,
well, that's music to our ears, you know that. And but more on just kind of the personal side. That's where the meaning, in terms of kind of one's own vocation or career path or career satisfaction. when you hear students say that. It just kind of has kind of a depth of meaning that you may not realize. So it's been fun to be a part of your academic journey at Augustana University, but as it is for me, been with by now thousands of students, probably. Yeah.
Really. That's so awesome.
Yeah.
And Donn, I want to thank you just for being so welcoming as I've come back. I ran into you a couple of weeks ago over in the Welcome Center in the admissions department, and just the warm welcome that I got, and just being allowed for me to work out of there, coordinate with campus safety to get access to all these different buildings has been so much fun to just really sit down with students in, special places that were meaningful for them and sort of set that scene and sort of show off the campus a little bit too and conduct these awesome conversations that I've had. And I mean, you even threw me a graduation as well, my own personal graduation ceremony, which is completely ridiculous, but I honestly thought it was the greatest thing. And to be honest, I didn't ask for it, but it was something that I don't want to say needed, but I was very, very much searching for, because I had to leave pretty abruptly and not really get a chance to say a proper goodbye to my friends. So it was really great to do an official walk in just with the ceremony with the President Stephanie coming over as well.
Wasn't that nice? Yeah.
And it was just, I think it's really been a strong closure for me. And I think it really just speaks volumes to how amazing the community is here at Augustana.
Yeah. One of the first presidents of the university that I worked for, President Ralph Wagner, he kind of started a phrase, once a Viking, always a Viking. And so I think that's true, is that, and I think that this is kind of true in a general sense across American higher education, that American universities like to, once we graduate you are part of our family. And so you're always welcome back. And so we love having alumni come back, and we love having the opportunity to re-engage and kind of rediscover where you've been, what you've been doing, and is there any way for us to continue to support you in your professional career. So it's been great to have you back. We don't have as many international alumni returning to campus for as long as you've been able to kind of stick around. So this has been certainly a great experience for us to have you on campus and engaging with lots of your former classmates and teachers as well. So it's been nice to have you around, for sure.
It's been the best thing ever.
Yeah.
And I think I never really understood what the whole, the diehard fandom for your university was over in the college, because back in Australia, people sort of get their degrees and it's like, oh yeah, I went to Melbourne Uni or Sydney Uni, whatever. It wasn't really a big deal, but I mean, I've come all this way just to come back, and I've loved every single minute of it. So I think it just speaks to just how much the US is really passionate about their college system, and Augustana specifically, how much it's everyone really cares for one another.
Yeah, nope. So I would say in that context, and particularly even with your experience with the athletic teams on campus, that's kind of unique to American higher education. Same thing with
that was
the performing arts,
the reason
music,
why I
and
came
theater.
Was for the basketball.
Absolutely, and we have students coming for music and theater and art and other kinds of performance that find that same kind of meaning that's kind of special and unique to American higher education. And then again, like you say, the way that American colleges and universities kind of embrace their alumni even after graduation and welcome them home during annual homecoming events. It's kind of unique to American higher education. I think that's one of the cool things about American higher education culture, is that whole process of trying to welcome graduates home during homecoming week and other parts of the year. So this has been a real homecoming, I think, for all of us to have you back on campus.
Yeah, it's been epic. Time of my life again. Round 2, pretty much.
That's good.
But with that, Donn, thank you so much for coming back to college.
Thanks for inviting me back to college. It's been a great opportunity to chat, to catch up, and to reminisce.